Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Andy Work Jr. I'm the president for the Fort Belknap Indian community for the Aani Nakota tribes at the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation in Montana. Thank you. So I've been asked here today to introduce my friend. I just wanted to say a few things first before I did, or I do. So, first of all, I just wanted to acknowledge the Creator for giving us a good day here today, and I'm thankful. And it's always important to remember your faith and your culture and who you are, and people that have come before you. So I'm very thankful to the Creator today for being here. It's a good day at this historic event. I just also wanted to acknowledge everyone that participated in organizing this effort here. OJ and his wife and Brett and the other folks, the other sponsors that organized this event. I know it's a lot of work, so thank you. I also wanted to acknowledge my crew that's with me here today, Eleanor and Alyssa and my fellow, I think he didn't make the panel, but tomorrow my fellow council member from Fort Peck, Justin Dupree, and William Snuffy Main, who was a former chairman twice over in Fort Belknap and a council member, and invited us to come here, and my cousin Jarrett also that's here for the Center of Native American Youth.
On their side.
Yeah, I think you're kind of interrupting me there, Steve.
Yeah.
Hold on a second here.
So is that picture coming from them or is that on your screen?
We're not on Stephen Colbert. Hold on a second here.
So you have a problem.
Anyways, I just wanted to say that Governor Bullock is a very good man. He's a family man, and I also wanted to take the time to tell my wife and my kids, who are very patient with me. This is my fourth term being on the council in Fort Belknap, and they are my biggest supporters. I also wanted to thank the Aani Nakota people for allowing me to serve as their elected official. So, my friend, who's been...
Are you receiving the audio from the microphones? We are not receiving audio.
Okay, they'll get it here in a second. Anyways, the governor has served 2 terms as a governor in the state of Montana.
I mean, you could
which is
do it by phone if push comes to shove.
maybe I'll text him for a second and tell him to hold on here, but
Can you hear us?
I can hear you, Steve. I can hear you. Everybody can hear you. Anyways, yeah, Governor Bullock has, Montana's a red state, and as 2 terms as a governor and 1 term as the Attorney General before that, Governor Bullock has, in my opinion, done a very good job working across party lines in a Republican state and a Republican-controlled legislature for both of his terms as governor. And I think that's where he can bring real value to this race. He's a mediator. He's an attorney, a mediator, a mitigator, and he's someone that is more than willing to sit down with anyone and find solutions. And he's been our friend in Montana, the tribes there. A lot of different reasons. Nothing is perfect, but there have been some good things in Montana when it comes to tribes as far as government-to-government relationships. And Governor Bullock has made sure that that is of utmost importance to him when it comes to tribes. And even recently, in our last state legislative session this spring, we worked closely with him, the other tribes in Montana, and the state legislature. There are 7 reservations in Montana, 11 tribes there. And we have the most Native American legislators in any other state. I'm real proud of that fact. So, in my opinion, that's just an example of how our government-to-government relationships are getting better, and the respect for tribal sovereignty also. So I just wanted to mention a couple of things. The governor, we worked closely with for Medicaid expansion this last legislative session in Montana, and there's a program, an IHS, that's been in the Affordable Care Act and the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act since 2010 called CHAP. I don't know how many people are very familiar with it. It's been in Alaska for a very long time, but it's still an unfunded mandate, but it's a program where there's going to be better health care for all Native people. There's components of it, the behavioral health, dental health, and community health component. And we worked hard our last legislative session to get the dental component passed. And that's the first time in the lower 48 that the dental component has been passed through the state. Because in the federal law, you have to get it passed by your own state. So we're real proud of that, and that is an example of our good relationship that we have with our governor in our state. So without further ado, I don't see him on the screen anymore, but I'd like to introduce Governor Bullock, who is running for president, and my friend, a family man. And I just wanted to say that he couldn't be here today for personal family reasons, but I'm glad that he took the time to video conference in, so I'll turn it over. Thank you. Yeah, I think they want me to keep going because they're trying to get him back online, so I'm not much of a comedian, so you guys might start throwing stuff at me up here, but anyways, and I kind of step away for a second. I don't know what we should talk about while we're waiting, you know. That was my bit there for a second, you know, and I kind of lost it, I guess, but yeah, you don't want to hear me sing or dance, but yeah, so I guess, you know, one thing I guess I could mention, you know, about the tribes in Montana, and just, you know, we do have, like I said, 11 tribes, 7 Indian reservations, and we have one tribe, the Little Shell, that are still fighting for federal recognition. And they've been fighting for a very long time, and they've really gotten some traction this session of Congress. We'll see if they make the cut, but if you folks can keep them in your prayers, and hopefully, you know, there's been so many tribes that have fought for federal recognition even when it's been taken away from them. So hopefully you folks, I'll ask you to keep them in your prayers to ensure that they get federal recognition that they deserve. So, I don't know what, I think we're still waiting here, but, you know, I have my question all prepared for the governor. Will I get an opportunity here? If there's one thing that I haven't heard so far from any of the questions or from any of the candidates, it's water. And water is life, right? So we're working very hard, our current council in Fort Belknap, to get our water settlement approved. And we have really made a sincere effort to try to be transparent with our own membership. There's always a need for improvement with that. Even recently, where we've brought on a PR firm to help us with that. So I was in California last week. NARF and the Western States Water Council sponsored a water symposium that they have every 2 years. And it was at the Rincon Reservation in Southern California, and it was really great. There's only been 36 water settlements that have gone through and passed through Congress and through the White House. And there's still well over 500 other tribes to go. And, you know, if I get an opportunity to say something, it's this. The way that the government has handled prior settlements. They want to continue to do that when it pertains to water settlements also. You know, if you think about land claim settlements or even the recent tribal trust settlements, they prefer to negotiate with tribes one-on-one. They have to do that because all tribes are unique, right? But they don't want to consult. And they do not want to have, in my opinion, a broad-based policy within the administration, especially at the Department of Interior, for Indian water rights settlements, and there needs to be one. The current president hasn't signed new Executive Order 13175. He hasn't rescinded it either, but he hasn't signed it, whereas many, many presidents that have come before him have. And if you're not familiar with that executive order, it's the one that be followed and abided by when a president signs it. And consultation for tribes and negotiated rulemaking. So last week in California, we've been working so hard, and it's been difficult working with Interior to water rights. So last week there was a good discussion, and a lot of the other tribes came to California to talk about the same. Has had a shift in policy when it comes to Indian water rights. They have moved away from a project-based policy and now are moving towards a fund-based policy for Indian water rights settlements. And we've got a lot of concerns with it, like a lot of the other tribes do also. And so I think that's what's really important. And if I have an audience of tribes and tribal leaders here, there needs to be some type of tribal water coalition nationally. And whatever venue that's through, whether that's through NCAI or COLT, I talked with OJ about, or continue to work through NARF and the Western States Water Council, tribes need to organize, and they need to have a tribal water coalition where they can put pressure on the administration and Congress to have meaningful consultation and negotiated rulemaking when it comes to these Indian water rights settlements.
We have the governor on the phone, so you can ask the questions, and then he'll answer this way.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess they got the governor teed up here on the phone. So, but that's my spiel on water, and it's really important. We filed with Rosebud with NARF litigation against the Keystone Pipeline. We're going to be in Great Falls next month for a hearing, Great Falls, Montana. So please keep us in your prayers. And you know, what's more important than water in this generation? It's probably our last big settlement that we'll have with the United States. So thank you. And I think we're back on here, Steve.
I think we're set.
Right on. You couldn't hear them, but they could hear you, and so they kind of got a kick out of it. They thought Stephen Colbert was behind the curtain here somewhere. So.
That's no way to start this off, President Burke.
Yeah, so I'll just, I already did your introduction even though you got cut off, but I just wanted to once again introduce my friend, Governor Bullock, from the great state of Montana, to you folks here who's running for the next president. So thank you.
Thank all of you. And as Andy mentioned, first I apologize that I'm not here with you. 25 years ago, I had an 11-year-old nephew shot and killed on a playground in Montana by a 10-year-old. And the time is the youngest schoolyard shooting in the country. A Safe Schools Summit to recognize this 25 for me to be there as well. But I so appreciate both the sponsors. I also appreciate you all taking the attention to opportunities we have in Indian country. It was kind of funny because someone asked me last week how I might prepare for this forum. And I responded that that's what I've been doing for the last decade in public office. As a public servant has been with our Native peoples and government-to-government relationships and in Indian country. And also, candidly, some of the most heartbreaking and tragic times I've had in elected office in Montana have been with our tribal nations. Here in our state, we truly recognize that the fabric of this state is woven with our Native peoples. Struck me right after I got elected, I did a health improvement plan for the entire state. Quickly learned that if you're Native in Montana, you're going to live 20 years less on average than non-Native people. So that you might think, well, part and doing everything, the culture and the unique identity. We were the first reservation program for each of our tribal nations, and then letting those best way to go about that. Today we will transfer to the Fort Peck, recognizing that humanity is stripped of their spirit animals. In a sovereign relationship, some of the unique, knowing that it's that much harder to start a business. We commenced and we had the first program in the country where this for that entrepreneur's loan. We haven't lost one business. The educational challenges in Indian country can be different than in other areas. Another of the first in the country apprenticeship programs just tailored the reservation and also the needs and the opportunities for this. These are significant. That's everything from longevity to so certainly when we expanded Medicaid expansion in Montana, we knew that 15,000 of them would be our Native American brothers and sisters. In just life and limb, but can do preventative work. Tragedies that we've hit with, it haunts Native and non-Native, taking state dollars to address some of those. CIA is the principal role when it comes to healthcare. Just to take the state fund and work with our tribal nation. Tourism. We have programs just dedicated to doing about 12 million visitors. So great when our visitors get to experience the rich. We've also addressed every judge I've ever appointed asked in an interview is the judge. So I've certainly been both blessed to work with folks like President Work, Native American, 10% of our cases been blessed and I've been challenged, and I only got in about 12 weeks ago. I had to get Medicaid expansion reauthorized, but in my first trip, Iowa, I went to the Mascots Nation as part of that trip. And so it was because whether you're in Anna, the United States is going to and is going to work in partnership. You having me on just by Skype, and I look forward to all of the questions that might be asked.
I'm going to pass you by phone first to Nancy Deer Turner.
Great, thanks, Mark.
Indian mascots have plagued schools and sports teams all over this country. Mascots, and even the Washington NFL term, instead I'll refer to them as the R word. They use a racist and dehumanizing slur as its mascot. The outright racism of Indian mascots have consequences, which include show that Indian mascots of self-worth and community due to bring an end to Indian mascots.
Because it is one where it shows just a base misunderstanding of both history and how that history has continued to contemporary times, as so many of our mountains and our creeks, and where it might have been fine to say at some time in our life that not only is that that it can be. I'm glad that we're finally getting to this point where one thing we're truly, truly lacking any moral leadership. What is acceptable for preschoolers, let alone the President of the United States. So part of this is leadership, and as a president, you can't wave a wand and say every under a local control sort of encourage for us to be much more both thoughtful, offensive language like that. Family from Helena, Montana, in Washington, went out. Well, you still have your football team named the Redskins. Contributions in sports, as great uncles did. So we have Indian, and we need to get to the point where offensive names, be it on a mountain, longer present. And I'll do everything I can. You can. Legislative steps we can take, we do.
Governor, next question comes from Marlon White Eagle.
Governor. My question here is about economic development barriers that we face as tribal nations, federal laws, some of which also we deal with fee to trust issues, and we also look at leveraging capital for Native businesses and Native tribes. We also deal with taxation issues, again there with state gaming compact agreements, with Indian country, with Indian gaming in particular being the 12th largest industry in the United States. As president, what would you do to make or empower tribal economies?
Yeah, and thanks for the that I've seen in the last, 6 years as governors, 4 years as attorney general, is that, right, that self-governance also requires economic self-sufficiency. And recognizing that there are unique barriers in the so that was everything from it's hard to get capital to invest into the thought that they weren't sure that there would be the, I guess, continuity and sufficiency with the tribal and the sovereign judicial system. So steps taken like to do tribal LLCs where the tribal government's not providing any, giving up any of their sovereignty, and it was the tribes that came to us, that and like a universal, that giving folks confidence from the outside to invest. Also then recognizing that there are unique challenges, which I mentioned at the beginning, like we've done Indian country economic development dollars, where the good thing is I'm not the one directing how that money should be spent. It's actually tribal appointees that are collateral programs as well. And what we need to do, and directly to your point too, is I have on the one hand, but that's the formal consultation. Those consultations throughout my state government. Cabinet of, I want to know who issues that might occur. And then what we've tried to do on every step of the way is on a government basis to ensure that the tribe walks out feeling that it's more than fair news. And that way it also does in a way that promotes or prevents, if you will, double taxation. Many of these agreements are done at the states that take differing views on it. But from the presidential side, then I think you have to promote a way where obstacles can be actually to growth in Indian country, and recognizing those obstacles are not just because of 2019, they are historical barriers, and addressing each one of those so that our tribal nations can have economic self-sufficiency.
Our next question comes from Jason Cook. You have to hold this really close too.
The question is, if you are elected president with tribal nations, and will you advocate for legislation that makes consultation requirements enforceable when agencies do not fulfill trust responsibilities on consultation?
I could just leave it at that. But look, that is part of the trust responsibility. And we see time and time again, I mean, I hope that President Work and others from Montana would say that it's something that I take so very, very seriously. Like when I wanted to create an Office of American Indian Health, is but one example. That was in part because the health directors of each of our Indian nations came to me and said, we need to do that. It took a little while because I wasn't going to then design that. I wanted my agencies to so that when we started this off on an ad hoc basis, or it wouldn't have just reflected what I wanted, but it actually and I think that far too often, especially in the natural resource areas, at least has been my experience, is that the federal government doesn't fully understand its trust responsibilities, and it doesn't understand the importance and the requirement of consultation. Now, I've never walked out of they want, but if we're not building in that base level of understanding and dialogue, well, the federal government could be, and if the Native American voice is left out of that, then we all suffer. So you could certainly count on me to adhere to the point, you know, there's both formal and informal. I think the next president, whoever he or she is, as they turn around for Indian country, I think that doesn't come from that president. That comes from informed by consultations across his voices, your voices individually, and your voices government to government.
Our next question comes from Indigenous Counsel.
Thank you, Mark, and I want to thank once again and Barb and Brett for their incredible vision, and I cannot thank you enough. And we should all collectively thank them. Governor Bullock, good day.
Hey, Tom.
Okay. From one Montana Blackfeet to a Montana Bullock. I hope your day is going well. I am so sorry to hear of your loss. That is heartbreaking. I want to thank you, Governor, and the audience. As I said before, you cannot have a discussion about America First if you don't include the first Americans. And this is all about vulnerability and what we do about it. So I want to give a short shout out to the need to protect our wolves, and there's a wolf treaty out front, which is a call to action. Please respect that and honor that. The two greatest scars on our nation's soul are slavery and the genocide of its native people. In 2016, 5,712 missing, murdered Native American women were reported in the United States. The Department of Justice database. Now think about that. 4,424 soldiers were lost in Iraq and Afghanistan over the course of the Iraq-Afghanistan war. 3,000 were killed on 9/11. And we had 5,720. Now, I know we don't do a lot of shopping in shopping malls, or we got lost there. And there's not a lot of alerts for us on CNN. But murder is for Native women in this country. Think of that. The third leading cause of death is murder for Native women. The Canadian National Inquiry on MMIW just completed its work. And they called it modern-day genocide. Now, geno is Greek. And side is killing in Latin. So we share something in common with our Jewish brothers and sisters. Bosnian Muslims, the Cambodians, the Iraqi Yazidis. It is represents, and I know the governor has made his efforts, but it represents a systematic failure of leadership with our public policy officials, a failure with regard to the media. Once again, do you think for one moment that there'd be 5,712 Native women if they were all lost in shopping malls and there were alerts on CNN? We've had to put billboards around the country, in Arizona, in Montana, in South Dakota, in Michigan, to raise awareness of this issue. Unfunded mandates from our more fiscally aware brothers and sisters. How about some funded life? That's where we should go. So what I really, you commit as president and in your campaign, because one thing we are so very tired of is authorizing legislation with no money in it. If I hear one more person in the halls of DC or Helena or any capital in the United States where they say you have the money. You've spent about $120 billion in Afghanistan and Iraq. That is 40 times our annual BIA budget. Data. If you don't measure it, you don't value it. We need data, Governor, that we can share with the CDC and the Urban Health Institute. And we want real-time data. I've heard the need for data. Fund it, gather it, measure it. Your own wonderful constituent tribe, the Blackfeet, will be holding the very first national tribunal on MMIW this fall in this nation's history. Speak to us in this room today and across the country that no more unfunded life bills and the need for data. Because only if with data can we measure it, and then we can help heal it and solve it. So once again, Governor.
Thanks, Tom. Hannah Harris was a 21-year-old on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. Hannah went missing in July 2013. She wasn't even getting attention for being missing for a little while, and was found murdered shortly thereafter. I wish Hannah Harris to the Northern Cheyenne or unique to Montana. That first trip that I went to the Meskwaki Nation, they had folks out looking at that very moment. Been murdered. I think it had been months, if not even years before, where there was still no record. If you would visit me at my office in the state capitol, there's a beautiful painted rock. It's a rock with a name on it, on the back. Part of the celebration, if you will, that we did get through, and I think President Work mentioned at the start. 5 or 6 bills to finally start addressing. And to your point, Tom, it does not get attention. 5 or 6 bills, the headline of which was Hannah's Act, but also providing repositories of even photos. Across government and beyond, a task force to say, here's what we can do in Montana. There are unique challenges at times, especially here in the West. Tom knows that the size of the Blackfeet Nation, there are parts of it that still doesn't even have cell coverage, and we need to work on things like that. No Native American family should be saying, where is that federal government? From the federal side. The challenges of if a peace officer, far too often you end up having to go for your training across the country just to get that. And the challenges of funding. On the one hand, I'm pleased that both in Montana and the rest of the nation is finally paying attention to the over 5,000 women missing. The 10x of being murdered as a Native American woman. But just paying attention isn't enough. And part of funded mandates, but part of it too is a Savannah's Act or a Not Indivisible Act or other things at the federal level that hasn't even passed. Responsibilities. We should not have to rely on state legislatures and state tribal leaders to take the lead. So you certainly have my commitment on twofold. Here in Montana to Washington, D.C. I'll take the lessons I've learned, some of the successes we've had, but also the recognition that there's still a lot more to do. In this big field, of candidates, I think a lot of people will talk of, as your last speaker, Tom, knows, the first time I really worked with him was we tried to figure out ways, as a result of a lawsuit against the Secretary of State's office, to get satellite voting. If you're a Native American having to travel what can be literally times hundreds of miles to get to the county seat courthouse just to exercise your right to vote. There's systemic inequities and challenges all over. Most gripping now perhaps is finally the fact that it is an epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women. States alone ought not be taking the lead, and it's time that we never forget the voices lost to 5,516 women all across this country.
And get 2 last questions in. And what I'm going to do is just have them ask the question and then kind of come up with a summary at the same time. So first,
Sounds great.
Good afternoon, Governor. My name's Patty Hibbler, and I'm a citizen of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes of Montana. I currently live, I heard a woo back.
Patty, you only heard that Jason Smith, who's my head of office of Indian Affairs, that's your cousin's mom.
He's actually my nephew.
Our nephew, yeah.
Yes. So I currently live in Phoenix. I've been there for 25 years. I am CEO at the Phoenix Indian Center and also president of. That's a coalition that really comes together to work on issues for urban living American Indians. So people in the audience, we all know that one of our most precious resources in India are people up here today. My question is about urban employment, particularly for lower income and lower skilled community members in the urban areas. So just to put this in perspective a bit, 2000 and 2010, and continue to increase, and in the greater Phoenix area where I am, they've increased by 50%. Furthermore, as this number of individuals begins to increase in urban areas, funding has decreased drastically, with the highest funding being in 2000 and continues to decrease each year. 50% is employed or underemployed, meaning 41% are something else. So whether they're unemployed, retired, or living on subsidy, but a large number of unemployment in relation to much lower numbers for the general community. My question, would you pursue to address unemployment and underemployment with our community members in urban living areas?
And then Lester Thompson from Crow Creek. I apologize for meshing these together, but we passed the clock a while ago.
Well, as introduced, Governor, my name is Lester Thompson, Jr. I'm the current sitting chairman of the Hunkpati Dakota Oyate, also known as the Crow Creek Sioux Tribe. I humbly come before you today and humbly come before our elders. Now, to the elders, I ask for forgiveness. Again, I'm humbled and honored to be in your presence and to be able to speak today. Governor, my question today is going to be pointed at what I hold as probably the most sacred resource in Indian country and probably the world. It is towards our children. My topic is Indian Child Welfare Act. The Indian Child Welfare Act was enacted in 1978 to address the stark number of Native children being taken from their families and communities. At the time, 25 to 35% of all Native children were being taken from their parents, and of those, 85% of children were placed with non-Native families and outside of their tribal communities. Even today, Native children are still 4 times over, despite Texas ruled the law unconstitutional last October. More than a couple weeks ago. My question to you is, as president, how will you protect landmark legislation like ICWA and other laws designed to uphold the rights of tribes to protect the welfare, well-being, and fate of our children? Add it, what qualifications will you look for in judicial nominees who may hear cases regarding tribal sovereignty?
Mr. Chairman and Patty, thank you both for the questions. Maybe I'll take the latter and opportunity because the challenge is in both the cutback non-Indian nations. I think, Mr. Chair, and when the Fifth Circuit then it takes another one of those stains from the past away where families were can stay together. I will do both is important. And you know, I look at our US Supreme Court right now as but one example of just about every judge is from somewhere what they call the Acela corridor, right? It's all the East Coast. Sovereignty, ICWA, water rights, so many of those issues to them. Issues. Have no exposure or understanding challenges. Appoint judges, just like every judge I've appointed, 2 of them to our state Supreme Court, and every one of the district court judges in Montana, even if they're nowhere close to a reservation. I ask them questions here about the justice system as it relates to American Indians. We'll ask them for their understanding of that, because I think that is so essential along the way. For all of it, resources along the way. We have to make sure that every child has your unique culture. Part of it is ensure at a tribal nation or downtown Phoenix or downtown that you have every single of always doing a little bit better. Everything from Indian health centers and to unique MBE programs, minority business enterprise. Certainly, you got to recognize reflects also where we spend our purchasing power, both where products were bought, but also where we're invested in the opportunities. And I do look, just as I've done in the last 10 years in public office, brothers and sisters, so that talking about a help or a generation from now, or a generation from now. And gosh knows for any of these, we can't wait a generation, even though for many, many of our tribal nations and Indian people, they've been waiting 8 generations backwards. But we won't be turning around saying the economic disparities are significant based on the color of your skin or your tribal affiliation. I do believe we can be this country. And I think that bringing someone in to the top position that actually has not only an understanding of our that much more you'll give careful consideration to both what we can take this great nation, Indian peoples feel like they have, because of our entire country. So I really difficulties you accommodating to actually bring not only Iowa, but to indeed the world.
Thank you to our panelists.